Hello YouTubes, this is Grimweird coming back at you with more Enigmatica 2 Expert Mod Pack playthrough action. This is E2E version 1.75 for Minecraft 1.12.2. So last episode we bashed through a lot of blood magic and astral sorcery and some Thaumcraft just to get us some necessary prerequisites to get through those, mainly alchemical brass and thaumium, which were required in some of the steps that we needed to take for blood magic and astral sorcery. So now we're circling back to Thaumcraft in this episode to try and finish a large chunk of that off. So let's take a look at what I've done and how I've done it. If we come up to my magic room here. So one of the first things to note is that Thaumcraft is somewhat unique in this mod pack in that there's actually two sets of progressions. There's the, of course, obvious progression through the Better Questing mod pack. So these are gates for getting rewards. So in other words, you could make some of this stuff before it's opened up, but you won't get a reward for it until you go through the whole progression in most cases. But in Thaumcraft, we also have to deal with this progression, this knowledge progression. There's a little of that in astral sorcery. There's a couple of steps in there, like getting yourself attuned and getting an iridescent altar, and etc. There are a few steps there, but they're much less obvious and frustrating than in Thaumcraft. So in Thaumcraft, there's lots of stuff to do. You've got to scan a bunch of stuff with your thermometer. Fortunately, thank goodness, you can scan containers now, although I haven't figured out a way to do that for stuff that's in your ME system. So if anybody knows how to do that, or if it's possible, please let me know. But at least you can do things like you can scan the drawer controller for storage drawers, you can scan crates, and you can pick up everything there. So that's one type of research, that is observation research. But then you also have to have theory research. So a lot of these things, if we look here, you'll see that you require some oromancy observation, some artifice observation, some fundamentals observation. All of that comes from scanning things with your thermometer. But then it also requires some theory from oromancy, which comes from the research table. So that's what I did a lot of in the last couple days, is a lot of research table work. So if you're not familiar with how this works, or have only used it a little bit and feel like you could use some more knowledge, this is basically what you got. You got this table, you put scribing tools on there. This runs down in ink, and you occasionally have to add another ink sac to it. It also uses up paper. These are sort of like these light bulbs are sort of your starting points that you get through the research project or process. And then if you put various things within four spaces of the research table, you can use them as research aids. So you can see here I have a beacon, I have a workbench, I have a bookshelf, I have an enchantment table, and those are all close by. So if I want to, I can select those. I'll pay one light bulb here for having this, but this will allow me to draw more interesting, potentially, selections when I'm going through the creation process. I sort of like doing both the beacon and bookshelf, but it also sort of depends on what you're aiming for. If you're, really trying to if you're really trying to get yourself a lot of warp and trying to go after eldritch knowledge, you can make yourself a brain in a jar and select that, and it'll help specifically with that. These bookcase and beacons sort of give just sort of general stuff, and so I sort of like that. But if we take a look, and let's just do one for a sample, we'll take a look at the kinds of things you do. Up here it'll tell you how much of these it'll cost, and then there's some text here, and it'll be like, so this consumes additional paper and ink, so it'll be 2 ticks and 2 ticks, I believe. This one takes 2, but it gains 15 to 30 in a random category. Let's go ahead and try that real quick. So my random categories are Arcane Infusion and Fundamentals. Now you'll notice here that this one is sort of a cyan blue color. Um, unless things change, you only get credit for the highest one of these. So right now, if we were to end this experiment right now, we would have a 21% chance of getting an arcane infusion theory um, research piece. Um, and that can change, so let's take a look at things here. Okay, so this brings up another mechanic. So occasionally there will be things at the bottom. In this case, if we have a sticky piston in our inventory, we can select this. Right now, if we try to click it, nothing happens. But if we grab ourselves a sticky piston and put it in our inventory, now with that there, we can click on this and we can use it. And we got our points in Artifice, and you can see that now it's the leader with 26%, so it has moved up into the active area here. Study Eldritch. I don't want to do that anymore because I've got pretty much all the Eldritch research I want. So I'm going to leave that alone because I don't want to get any more warp. Don't want to drive myself insane. In this one, we can lose all of our progress in fundamentals, which is only 7%. But most of the process will be added to Artifice. Sure, that's reasonable. Here's another one where if we have a daylight sensor, we can use that. We can do Rethink. Now that'll actually give us a +1, so we'll actually get an extra light bulb here. But in that case, we lose 10 progress and divide everything up equally. So we only have 2 here, and they're pretty close. So that's not going to be a huge thing, but it will give us another light bulb. Boom, you can see we got that. So, you know, whatever. Sometimes you're just trying to move through this. Here's another one where if I have a file of Tenebrae Essentia, I can click on this one. So let's talk a bit about that. Well, let's just finish this one real quick. Let's study fundamentals. Here's the other metric that's important. Now, when they're down here and they have an exclamation point next to them, this means it'll consume them. You'll notice it didn't consume the sticky piston because there was no exclamation point. But on this bad boy, it'll actually consume them. And here's I think, one of the last mechanics I wanted to show, which is in Synergy. Down at the bottom it says an additional category will gain the full bonus upon completion. So right now, only this Artifice gets the full bonus of 24%. I think there's a small chance or a lesser chance that we might get a Fundamentals Research success or an Arcane Infusion success. But if we pick this one, now you can see there are 2 cyan ones here. So now we have the full bonus and the full chance of getting these. We actually have a full 30% chance and 20% chance of getting these when we complete this. So that's another thing to watch out for, because as these sometimes go through, sometimes you find yourself doing well in multiple ones. So now we can lose up to 5 experience levels, but gain Auramancy. Here we can gain, we're already doing good in Gallimancy, so we can gain another 25 in Gallimancy. So now we're getting sort of on in our stuff here. We've sort of got a feel for what's doing good for us. Now we want to push to sort of getting towards, you know, as close as we can to 100%, and getting these top ones up here pretty high so that we can actually successfully get theory research out. And if you get to a 100%, you'll automatically successfully get a Gallimancy one. If you go up to 150%, you'll get one with a 50% chance of getting a second one. So you can go over, so it doesn't hurt to go higher than 100% here. So I don't want to consume an enchantment table, so I'm going to ignore that one for now. And this will gain 25 progress over everything active, but it's going to cost me 2 here. So we're getting near the end here. I do not want to gain temporary warp, so I'm going to ignore that. I don't have any celestial notes because I find them annoying to collect and store. So we're going to go ahead with the universal theory. At any point, if you decide that you get choices here that do not work for you, like it wants to consume things that you don't have, or your percentages have gone in ways that you don't really need the research, you can just scrap the theory and cut your losses. We're going to go ahead with universal theory. That's added now a third category. So we have a pretty low chance of getting stuff, but at least we have full bonus on 3 categories. We can consume a diamond and a file of Lux Essentia, or we can split this again. Let's just split it again. So now we've got 4 categories at 33% chance. Hopefully we'll get 1 or 2 of these, and those will pop up right here if you watch for them when I hit complete theory. And we got a Gullimancy and a fundamentals. So that pretty much shows you most of what's going on here. Some of the things that you have to consume, we should talk about that real quick. Let me make sure I have some quartz slivers on me. And I think my files are in with my stuff. If we look at what's in my inventory, you can see that I do have some files that I've been using. I don't really like to burn files of them, but if it says it just wants to look at a file while I'm doing research, I will often make one and show it to it if I really need the research. And if we look at V crystals, you can see I have a wide variety beyond the normal 6 basic primary crystals. A lot of these come from early on when you have a crucible and you're trying to make something by throwing junk into it. If you have leftover stuff, for every 2V that's left over in the crucible, I believe, you can throw in a quartz sliver and it'll spit back out one of these crystals. And so that's a good way to use up leftover stuff in your crucible in the early days. And then now let's go take a look at what you do later when you have a more advanced Thaumcraft setup. So once you start dumping things into here, and to get Precantatio, which is needed for some of the infusions, this is sort of the magic one, I dumped a lot of magic fishing rods and bows that I got from fishing into there, and it gave me lots of other stuff. So you can see I've got about 35 out of 39 different flavors in jars already and labeled. But one of the things you can do here is, I mentioned that if you have leftover stuff in your crucible or intentional stuff in your crucible, you can make these various Viz crystals. However, you can also, when you're doing research, do it on purpose. So if we take a quartz sliver, so I'll mouse over that, quartz sliver, that is just made by, I think 1 nether quartz turns into 9 quartz slivers, so no big deal, no big cost. But now this will give you the recipes for making all of the various ones. And so, let's go ahead and make something that I have a lot of. I think I have a lot of vitreous. Oops, I'm now making multiple things. I can now select 2 recipes based on the fact that I now have a mnemonic matrix on there. But you can see here I made a vitreous Viz crystal. So there you go. And that just took a couple of... Where's my vitreous? That just took a couple of essence out of this jar. And turn that quartz one into there. So here's the way that you can get these odd types of crystals pretty easily for doing research. And then similarly for making the files, you can, where are my files? Maybe they're in my backpack. Maybe I ran out of files. Anyway, bottom line is you make a file. I think it's like I don't know, it's like 3 clay or it's like clay and 3 glass planes, or I don't know, it's pretty cheap. We could look real fast. 3 glass and a clay to make 8 of them. But anyway, basically you can just click on either the alembics here, you can take them straight out of the alembics, or you can take them out of jars and you can fill them up with tin essence and then use them in your research. So especially getting through the alchemistry or the alchemy research to get this kind of advanced alchemy essence setups, I find that the turning slivers into the secondary and tertiary crystals, V crystals, and getting files out for the infusion one is really helpful to get your way through some of this research. So that pretty much summarizes research, and it did take quite a bit of time. I spent a couple hours playing around with that. The other thing that is required that took some time was this, just research in general. You occasionally run into cases where you need to scan things in the world or do things in the world to open up some of the research that you need to close this chapter. So for instance, flux rifts. To get this, I had to create a flux rift and scan it. That's how I got flux, and I think I did that here at flux, and that's how I got flux rifts. For warp, you have to, I think, subject yourself to warp to do that. You have to scan some crimson cults and the crimson rites to open up this stuff. For delving into the eldritch, I think you might need to scan the Crimson Cult portal. I forget exactly. One of the important ones is getting into, to opening up this chapter, the Eldritch chapter. So to get this one, you have to make the void metal, you have to scan a void seed, I believe. And there is a recipe for making void seeds in this pack. So let's take a look at it over here. This recipe is for some Lonsdaleite and mycelium and a tier 5 crafting seed. Will give you void seeds, so you can scan that. I think that's what got me into void metal. And I think, I forget what opened this up. This may have just been opened up by scanning a rift. Anyway, there's things like that you got to worry about. I had to scan an iron golem, which I wandered around a lot looking for one in a village and finally gave up and made one with a T of 4 iron blocks and a pumpkin for a head. So, did lots of stuff like that. So let's take a look at where we're at in Thaumcraft. We have made all of the things. Let's look at it in the quest book. We have made all the things. I've even got a golem back here. Mud. His name is Mud. And a golem press and whatnot. I'm not really going to use most of that stuff, but whatever. I made it to close the chapter. And so if we take a look at everything else, I did have to go ahead and make an infusion speedstone and cost stone, and then I made another 2 cost stones just to make sure, just to give myself 4, because why not? We got the void metal. Basically, all we have left are the blink advanced focus, which is an infusion, and the Thaumium Fortress Armor, which is also an infusion recipe. So we've just now sort of reached a place where we've got to do some infusions. And then the real last big hurdle is getting this spot here. So after we get the Blink Advanced Focus, we've got to get the Blink Greater Focus, and for that we have to close a rift. So we had to open one and scan it to get some of this research, and then to get this very last piece we'll have to close the rift, which involves making essentially some sort of Rift Dynamite equivalent. But let me show you how I got that stuff. How did I get there? Oh, it's in my Ender book. Ocean Void. So what I did was I ran out into the middle of the ocean with a crucible and a dropper and built myself a little platform here and dumped a couple stacks of cobblestone in there, and then shift right clicked on the crucible to jettison all of the essence into the chunk. And I don't know if it helped, but I did this. One of the reasons I built this like this is I was standing in this chunk when I did that in that chunk. So I don't know if it helped, but I knew a void was going to pop up and I didn't want it popping up on me. So I stood over here, and that's why I'm standing a little ways away, and that's why I'm using the dropper instead of standing there dumping it in myself. But as you can see, we did that, and we created a little death noodle here, a little void noodle. So this guy's just hanging out. It's not going to do too much damage out here in the middle of the ocean. I think it'll eventually fade even if we don't get around to closing it first. But now we need to do some more infusing and some more research, and then come out here. We'll build a little platform under it, and then we'll try and blow it up and close it. So I'll film that later once I get there, but that's a ways off probably still. So if we head back to the base, pardon me, I have to cough. So the step we're at right now is we need to do some infusion. So I've set up our infusion stuff. I think last time I showed that I had set up the beginnings of an infusion altar over here. But now we can see that I've finished it up. So we have the infusion speed stone. I made one for the recipe. And then we made a cost stone. And then I just went ahead and made 2 more cost stones, because I hate standing around smelting essentia. Let's go get rid of the... my attunement altar is humming. Let's get rid of that. In fact, let's go make it daytime. Got a sleep charm, so that makes that fast. Alright. So you may wonder, everybody pretty much knows probably that you need to keep things symmetrical around here, so you might wonder about the stones under the pedestals. And I've got 1 speed and 3 cost. But if we take a look here, if I have my caster's gauntlet, if I have my goggles of revealing on so I can see Thaumcraft related stuff, and I have my caster's gauntlet, we can see that my current setup is, if I right click to refresh, make sure it's right, we're at 3.48 gain per cycle. So that's 3.48 stability points, if you will, gain per cycle, to offset any stability loss that might be caused by, say, a dangerous infusion. And if we remove this and then right click to refresh, you can see it doesn't do anything. So these do not affect that and do not need to be balanced. So we're going to go ahead and button that up. So the next feature you see here is that I've got 4 stabilizers in the corner with the redstone inlays in between them. And you can look at the base of my pedestals and see little red runes flickering along the base of the things, which means that they are connected. So these things act like a redstone circuit essentially. And so this stabilizer can affect pretty much all the way around the circle. That's why I have the keep my pedestals in tight. So what the stabilizers do is they prevent a lightning strike of instability. You know how there's sometimes those things where a pedestal will get struck by lightning or whatever, and either it'll start creating taint or it'll knock your component off the pedestal or etc. These will prevent that effect. But they have a recharge period. So in other words, let's say this pedestal here has an event, and this guy prevents it. Well, now this guy is going to be offline for a bit while it recharges. So if another one happens here, this one can prevent it. And if a third one happens here, this one can prevent it. These are sort of like redstone in that they travel a certain amount. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So these guys can get most of the ways around the circle and pretty much all cover for each other. So you could probably go with more, you could probably go with less, but this is sort of the way I want to do it. It gives me 4 chances to stabilize or to prevent destabilization events, and then it gives me a decent chance. So if we take a look at, and then just to show you that other things do affect it. So we have my gauntlet is showing us, and our goggles are showing us a 3.48 gain per cycle. If we break one of these bad boys and then click it with our gauntlet to refresh it, now you can see we go down to 3.38. And so then if we put our pedestal back, and if we then click it again, back up to 3.48. So that shows you that while the stones underneath our pedestal for speed or cost do not affect it, pedestals actually do, in fact, do that. And I'm not going to break it and pull it back up, but if I break one of these, I'll lose about 0.4 stability. But I'm not going to do it because every time you put one of these down, when you initially put it down, it charges itself by releasing taint. And I think if it prevents a destabilization event, it will also recharge itself by producing a little whiff of taint. However, when it's not doing anything, once it's been put down and once it's in place and once it's charged itself up and it's had a little fart, it's not going to do anything unless then you either pull it up and put it back down or it stops an event. But now let's take a look at more stabilization. I'm sort of a stickler for stabilization because I don't want my stuff going wonky. I like nice calm infusion events. So I made a little basement here full of candles. So what we have here is a stack of candles, and that is, there are 16 colors of candles for the 16 mystical flowers. So this is 4 candles of each color. So you can see I have 4 white, balanced. I have 4 black, balanced, etc. Coming out here, I've got, there's a light gray, and in the opposite corner, light gray. So there's 2 pairs of each color. There are diminishing returns per color. So in other words, your first pair of white gives you 0.1 stability, and I think the second pair gives you 0.08 stability gain. But it starts to fall off down 0.06, 0.05, 0.03, etc. So as you go more. So I personally find that this gives you plenty of stability. I think even the most dangerous and nasty infusions in Thaumcraft 6.1 beta 26, and that's important. This is Thaumcraft 6.1 beta 26. Now, if you're using a different type of Thaumcraft or a different version of Thaumcraft, it could be radically different. Thaumcraft has gone back and forth and up and down and sideways in all directions with how to stabilize infusion. So this is really dependent on your version of Thaumcraft. Even within, I think even earlier in Thaumcraft 6, it may have been different. So if any of you are saying, hey, wait a minute, anything past a few candles is garbage, that may have been true in the version of Thaumcraft you were using, but it's not true in Thaumcraft 6.1 beta 26. So that's very important. Okay, so back to this. Each color of candle is different. So you can have, you'll get 0.1 for your first pair of white, and you'll also get 0.1 for your first pair of orange, and also 0.1 for your first pair of red. So using a rainbow is helpful. However, skulls, if we take a look at them, all of the skulls and heads If we mouse over them and look at the OR dictionary, item skull. And if we take a look at, say, heads, creeper head is also item skull. A zombie head is also item skull. So basically, the infusion table sees all of these as the same. So anything more than a couple pairs of heads, you can see I have a pair of skeleton skulls and a pair of zombie heads. These don't even have to be the same. I could have one zombie and one skeleton, I'm pretty sure. And it would just see two skulls and it would be fine. But anything more than like about 4 skulls or heads is going to start getting badly into diminishing returns. So yeah, and also you got to keep it relatively tight. When I first set up the room, I set it up with the floor 1 or 2 lower so I'd have more headroom. And I was out of range, so I put down my first pair of candles, ran upstairs to make sure and check that I was getting stuff, and I wasn't. So I had to raise the floor 1 or 2 and double check and see that yes, okay, if I go up here with my goggles of revealing on and click on this, then yes, I'm very stable. And again, just to show you sort of how you can tell what you're doing here, if I come down here and I say break one of these, we are at 3.48. And let's say I break, let's just break one. And now I click here, I'm down to 3.31. Not only do I lose the benefit of having the pair, but now I'm asymmetrical. And so I've gone from 3.48 to 3.31. So again, if you need to check on if your symmetry is working or want to double check how much you're getting, that's how you do it with the gauntlet and the goggles. And if we go back up here, I'll beat this dead horse one more time with this gauntlet. Click, 3.48. All right, so we are good to go. Let's go ahead and craft something here. So I've got stuff. Oh, I didn't bring the essence up with me. In fact, I'm not even sure I have enough essence. So the things that we want to make are not chunk lines. We want to make this stuff. And we'll just do one of these. Let's do the most complicated and interesting one. We'll do this bad boy. So not in addition to thaumium plates and a thaumium chest plate and the leather and gold, I need to bring up bottles or in some way supply these amounts of stuff. So let me pause the recording and I'll check our runtime and I'll go make sure that we have this and I'll bring the bottles up and then we'll bust this bad boy out. Be right back. Okay, we are back with essence. So we've got a whole bunch of metallum. I needed to smelt some more of this. I just threw some pulverized copper in there at 10 per and ran that up real quick. We've got Premunio and we've got Potentia and metallum. So we are good to go. Now the costs on these are, the cost on this one that we're going to do is 50 metallum, but we have 233. I have a feeling we're going to use noticeably less than 50 because we've got 3 cost stones underneath our infusion matrix. So let's keep that in mind. We'll take a look. I don't know exactly how that works, or I mean how much the savings are per stone, so I'll be interested to see how we do that. So let's take a look at the recipe here. Oh, and also I've seen some people worry about where their mana is, but if we right click on our stuff, you can see we're still at 3.48 gain per cycle. So as long as this is close enough for the mana to be drawn out or the essence to be drawn out, you're good. You don't need to worry about balancing that or putting it anywhere special. I think it needs to be within several blocks of your center here, but it doesn't need to be any special place or in a spread out in a specific pattern. All right, so let's take a look at this one. We want to do this bad boy which is going to be 6. So we're going to do like a 1, 2. I'm going to do the corners on 2 sides and the centers on 2 other sides. And let's just go ahead and start here with some Thaumium plates. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that will leave leather across from there and gold there. So we want leather here. And we want gold here. And then, oh, I need my armor. Where is it? Let's see. I need my Thaumium chest plate. Is it in here, or did I put it on a... it's in here. So let's pull these bad boys out. So here's my Thaumium chest plate. And we're going to put that on the center to be converted. And we are good to go. We have got symmetry. If we look at it the way the recipe is laid out, we've got the symmetry with the plate, leather, gold. And we've got our thing in the middle to be converted. We've got mana and enough of it, and the right kinds of it. So we are very stable. So now if we right click on this again, you can see it's going to be a 0 to 0.6 loss per cycle for a minor stability issue, for a minor difficulty one. So as long as we've got all this set up right, this is going to be a piece of cake. We're only going to lose a maximum of 0.6 where we're gaining 3.48. So this should be a walk in the park, and which is what I like. I like a no drama kind of situation for this. So we can see that it's starting to pull out our mana, or our essence here, our V. And then at some point when it's done doing that, it's going to start pulling up. There's our second one. And then it's going to start pulling in our components. If we mouse over this, everything is fine. We're still very stable. Now you can see it's pulling in our plates, our leather. There's another plate going. Our gold. And here we go. Success. Now with an empty hand, I'm going to right click on the pedestal, and there we go. Done. So for right now, I need to do that with the helm and the thigh guards. And then I also need to make the blink advanced focus, this guy. But if you've seen one infusion, you've seen them all. All of these are instability minor. They're all going to be pretty darn easy. They're all going to be drama free, which is how I like it. Which is why I bothered to make a stack of multicolored candles. And some stability stabilizers. But the reason I did go overboard on the stability was to close a rift and to close out the Thaumcraft chapter. We're going to need, where is it? We're going to need to do this causality collapser. And now the instability is very high on here. We saw that a minor can be up to 0.06 or whatever loss for per round. Very high gets up at 2 something, I believe. So we still have plenty of stabilization to handle a very high, but that's why I went ahead and did it. I don't need it for these 4 infusions that we're doing to close the fortress armor and the foci, but I will need to do it to make the causality collapser, which is essentially the equivalent of dynamite used to close the rift. So I need to make some more stuff here and get all this ready to go. But that will probably be a later episode. So now, real quick, let's take a look at what else I'm doing. I have not used mystical agriculture before. Even in my last playthrough, I sort of ignored it because I didn't really need it. But I'm going to try to push to completion on this one if my world doesn't get too unstable. And so as soon as you have the iridescent altar from Astral Sorcery, you can start making some high-level seeds. So let's take a look at some of the seeds you can make. Awakened Draconium seeds. This seems like a good thing, being able to grow Awakened Draconium. I don't know, but it seems like it should be. And these happen on the iridescent altar. And if we take a look at Mystic seeds, there's just all sorts of stuff that you can do here, and they're arranged in tiers. Actually, a week or so ago, I made some tier 1 wood seeds, just because it seemed like a thing to do, and because I knew I would need the wood essence to make tier 2, and then I would need tier 2 essence to make tier 3, and so on and so forth. So I have gone through and done that. So if we take a look at tier 3, there's a variety of things you can make here. I settled on night slime seeds. Night slime ingots are part of the ultimate ingot, and it's the only one of these things that I don't already have tons of. I got tons of glowstone and tons of iron and tons of silver and yada yada, but I do not have tons of night slime. I could make it, but I needed to do some tier 3 seed anyway, so may as well do night slime. So I've got that, and I've made a bunch of that. And if we take a look at the recipe real quick here, this is even before, so it was only at the Starlight crafting altar. But basically, you have to have some initial night slime, so I did go ahead and smelt up and alloy up 4 blocks of night slime. And then it needs a bunch of blocks of the essence, and then it takes some tier 2 essence. So I forget what I'm making at tier 2. Oh, I think I'm making mineral. Yeah, mineral essence, because I've never played with integrated dynamics, and I thought it might be fun to try out here soon. So let's go take a look at what I did here. So I've got 22,000 wood essence. That's probably overkill, but I just sort of made a big box and threw it in there. I can always use it to make a bunch of wood if I run out of wood. And then I made a bunch of mineral essence here. There's only 8 left in the box, but I've turned it off. But if we take a look at what we've got in storage here, I've got 1,640 mineral wood. I've got 778 mineral berries. So I'm now prepared to do stuff with integrated dynamics if I decide to. It's not required in this pack, but much like the some of the other stuff I've done, like the terraforming, just because it isn't required doesn't mean I'm not interested in taking a look at it. The next tier up, tier 3, I made night slime. So I've got 256 ingots here and the ability to make a bunch more. Then the next tier up, I did Thaumium, which that is definitely one that it's a part of the ultimate ingot, so I'm going to need a bunch of it, but I don't want to go through smelting it and doing all of that garbage and making it. So that was, I think, a great one to pick. And then I got Draconium, so that is sort of cool. So I've now got 266 ingots of Draconium. I even charged 12 of them. So we sort of have all the Draconium we can grow now. So that's sort of cool. Considering that we haven't made the tier 6 Void Miner. So this is our source of Draconium now. If we take a look real quick, let me show you how I got that, because it takes a bunch of blocks of it to make the seed in the recipe. But it might be worth showing how to get that initial Draconium. So we got 3 or 4, we got enough for a couple of blocks in the Twilight Forest, which is all fine and good. But it's not that... Twilight Forest is sort of a pain in the butt. There's so much water and so much wood and so much dirt down at the level that you mine it, that it's sort of a pain, and it's more rare there than it is in the deep dark. So here we are in the deep dark. You can see I had a cave illuminator here for a while, so it's all lit up in a big square. And then I just vein mine straight down. And there's so much ore here, it's a little bit ridiculous. So much ore, it makes it difficult to actually vein mine and get through things. But if we come down here to bedrock, this is basically what I did to get my blocks of, let's see, this is the Draconium seed. So it took 8 blocks of Draconium in the iridescent altar. And so basically with saturation, this just goes super fast. It's basically just boink. Oh, hey, look, here's some. Oh, here's some. This does have, it's not as bad as the deep dark is not as bad as the Twilight Forest for being dirty and wet and nasty and having all sorts of roots in the way when you're mining. But it does have a bunch of dirt down here. So most people probably know this trick, but if you don't, you can put your shovel in your offhand. And now if I've got my pick in one hand and my shovel in the other, if I click on this, it'll use the shovel, and I can vein mine with that. So I can vein mine dirt and I can vein mine stone, both at the same time, just by dual wielding shovel and what have you. Oh, hey, look, here's some more Draconium. So getting enough for 8 blocks, which is 8 times 9, which is 72. Oh, look, there's some more down there. If you have saturation, it's not as bad as you might think. So there's 25. So there's enough for almost 3 blocks. And so that is what I did to make my seed. And you can see I basically just hogged out a big old area here. And there's also another big super vein for nuclear craft, or if you happen to be in it. But if you just look up, I didn't mine up, but if you look up, this is the reason to go to the deep dark. If you want to do some manual mining, just look at all that damn ore. I think there's more ore than stone here. But anyway, let's head back. Long story short, I've made a bunch of seeds. I've got, so I can now just grow with my garden cloche. I can grow mineral, which I probably won't never need anymore. Night slime, which I probably will need more for ultimate ingots. Thaumium, Draconium, and void metal. Void metal. So that's a good one. That's my that's tier 5. And that's why I was out of metallum, is because I made a bunch of void metal to do that one. So if we take a look at how I'm getting the goods for that, how I'm getting the mystical agriculture stuff for that, if you'll remember, you can see up at the top of my screen, I've got a wither bar here. So basically I've just been letting my wither farm just cook. So if you recall, in this big block here, I've got a 9x9 cursed earth spawner. There's also a blaze spawner that I stole from the nether in there. And there's also a mob duplicator for withers in there. So that's doing triple duty. And it's getting me tons and tons and tons of wither skulls. And I vein mined the snot out of some soul sand over in the nether. And so you can see over here, I've just got wither after wither pumping through my system. And the great thing about that is that if we take a look at here, not only do I still have tons of wither skulls, 732 here, plus probably, I don't know, 1,000 or so in this box. Yeah, plenty. But if we take a look at, let's get away from that noise. if we take a look at what's going on here, nether stars, I've got 3,500. But the thing for mystical agriculture that is important is that the wither boss also drops supremium. So I've got 13,000 supremium essence. Supremium essence can be broken down into superium, which can be broken down into intermedium, which can be broken down into prudentium, which can be broken down. Well, you don't need to do this because you've probably got tons of inferium. So once you have the wither cooking, getting up to the tier 5 stuff is actually pretty easy. So if we take a look at even the supremium ingots, are just a superium ingot wrapped in that stuff. So basically, once you're killing the wither on a regular basis with a farm, you got all the juice you want. Now getting into the tier 6 is going to be a little trickier. For that, we're going to need tier 6 crafting seeds, which is going to require insanium essence. But even that I can do if you have an infusion crystal. The 25 use infusion crystals are just ender amethyst thrown into an energetic infuser. So you just juice these up with 10 million RF. Takes a little while. You got to have some decent power. But ender amethyst isn't too hard to find in the end. You just dig around. There's about 1 ore per chunk. So that ain't too hard to get the 25 bangers. So it's doable. It's doable. And if we look at the tier 6 seeds, we are looking at things like awakened draconium is probably something I'm going to want. Maybe dragon egg seeds. We don't know. Nether star, probably not so much. Ender amethyst, I can get plenty of that probably. Terra steel, I'm getting a lot of that from recycling. Probably don't need it. Iridium, I can mine it. So basically, neutronium, I'm getting a lot of neutronium fluid or neutron fluid from my nuclear reactor. So for me, I think the key is going to be the awakened draconium seeds. So as soon as I can make 36 awakened draconium and a couple of wyvern cores, I should be able to do that. Yeah, piece of cake. So that is on the horizon. And that sort of sums up what I've been working on. A lot of standing at the research table and fiddling around with V crystals and files of V and doing research and opening up the Thaumanomicon. A lot of crafting there. A little bit of running around and exploring. Oh, if we take a look here also, one of the things I did, you can see it well now, is that in the iridescent altar, if we take a look at well, here you can sort of see it, but this faint outline in green of a constellation means that when you go to make this in here, you have to have an attuned rock crystal here. So for the stuff I wanted to make, the 2 crystals were, and we can actually see one of them here. So there's the one you needed. So what I did was I basically waited for that bad boy to be up in the sky, which there it is down on the horizon. And then I attuned just any old garbage rock crystal. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be, I used like a 25% purity piece of garbage rock crystal. But I threw it in here to attune it. And I did one for Mineralis as well. So here is one for Avitus, which is the one we just looked at. Purity 14%. So I don't care. And if we take a look over here, you can see by the pattern here that I've got Mineralis in there, which is the other one, purity 3%. So basically you can just do that, and you can see now we've got the green one here. So that's another thing you'll need to do for some of these high-end recipes for things like that's what I had to do for void metal seeds, which is why Mineralis was in there, is that I had to be ready to throw a nether star off in one of these side relays. So you can see here, you put this stuff in the 5x5 crafting. And then you have to have a crystal for mineralis off on the side, which I'll show you again in a moment. And then for stuff outside of the crafting matrix, these things will appear in ghost form over one of the relays, and then you place it in the relay when you see it. So here's the 5x5. Here's the attuned rock crystal for Avitus. And then if we were running this as it was going, one of these would show a ghost form of a nether star. We'd slap it in there and away it would go. So that was the step we had to do to get some of these higher end mystical seeds. So you will require some astral sorcery to get into the good stuff. But yeah, there we go. Probably over time I've been babbling, but that's what I've been doing in the last day and a half, 2 days, is working the Thaumcraft and getting a little mystical agriculture going. And so next we need to circle back to, another thing I did, don't really need to go into it much, but I did also, when I've had some spare time in front of a TV, I did finish off the industrial craft chapter and the forestry chapters. I just busted out those recipes. A lot of that stuff we're not even going to use. Let's see if for the only hard part of forestry is bees. So if we take a look at this real quick, this sign has an Osco glass handle, and it's linked to a jungle biome. Turn off the light sensor. And so basically I just threw some apiaries over here. And if we take a look at what's going on in here, bee stinging. I just created industrial apiaries with tropical bees in a jungle biome with light upgrades so they would go 24 hours a day instead of only working during the day, and automation upgrades so when the queen turned into a princess, it would feed her back in. And then because I'm impatient, what I did was I spent about 4 or 5 hours worth of time in the bottle and I just went nuts. So, and this is sort of funny, so I'm just going to do it again even though I don't need this anymore. Bees! Oops. Ferns! No, bees! Ah! Bees! So anyway, I just spent about 20 minutes sitting in front of the TV keeping these jacked up to 11 until they busted out enough of the silky comb. So the thing about the silky comb, which makes this sort of a pain in the ass, and which why I would wait to do, if you really want to close forestry and you really want to do this, the key thing here is that when you process one silky comb, you have an 80% chance of getting a silky propolis. That goes, 80%. So it'll take 10 to probably make 8. And then when you go to process that, there is a 60% chance of getting a silk wisp. And again, with this machine, also a 60% chance. And then, if you look at what you're doing with that, is you are using 9 of them to make 1 woven silk, and you need 24 woven silks. So 24 times 9 is like 216-ish, but you have a 20% drop off in the first step and a 40% drop off in the second step, so your yield is not great. So you're going to need, like, I would guess, I think the math comes out to needing like around 360 to 400 silky combs. So just be prepared for that. And again, if you're like me and spend a lot of time farting around where you're not activating things, like all the time I spent on Thaumcraft, I hardly activated anything. I think I sped up my Essentia smelter once or twice. But there's like several hours there, and I spent those several hours just dialing all these industrial apiaries up to 11 so that I could burn through that and finish off the apiarist armor, which is this stuff. And it's the normal recipes, so 5 for the hat, 8 for the chest, 7 for the legs, and 4 for the boots. 24 woven silks times 9 wisps times all the loss you have at the 2 process steps. Sort of fun. Not really, but okay. Enough said. All right. That's it. There goes another wither. So yeah, I closed industrial craft and forestry and immersive engineering. We had all the mats for this, so this was just a matter of dumping them through the craft stuff. Thaumcraft we saw is almost done. I'm going to finish up those last 3 infusions here. Then we got to make something, and probably next episode we'll go try and close that rift that we have out in the ocean. Astral Sorcery's done. I might try and just bang through extra utilities and mechanism. We've got most of the stuff for that and that and that. So I'm just going to bust through that in my spare time. The next major bit of work was we got to work through Britannia. We got to fight the Gaia Guardian a couple times and do that kind of stuff. And then we can circle back around and close Blood Magic. RF Tools, Nuclear Craft, Thermal Expansion. That's pretty easy to close for the most part. And then we can start on Advanced Rocketry. So probably next time I'll show you a lot of Britannia and closing a rift for Thaumcraft. And then time after that we'll show off a lot of Advanced Rocketry. And then time after that we'll probably go to other planets. And then at some point we'll get into 4 or 5 episodes from now, we'll get into the whole Draconic Evolution, Avaricia, Bragging Rights extravaganza, which I'm much less knowledgeable about. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about what I did or why I did it, or if you have any tips for me so that I can do this better and faster next time, I would appreciate it, and please leave a comment. Bye.